From pesticide-filled food to the mental drain of being online 24/7, modern life can feel exhausting. So many among younger generations are walking away, hoping that growing their own food and living closer to nature may bring the peace they yearn for. But is this a real solution, or something only a privileged few can afford? I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
You're witnessing an overstimulated generation start to find peace at home. We quit believing the lies of convenience and hustle that the world was telling us and decided to make a sanctuary right here, trying to show our kids that busy doesn't equal happy or valuable. A slower life where we get to connect more with the world around us, trying to go back to traditions that have been lost, like growing your own food, and trying to create a more fulfilling life at home rather than seeking it elsewhere. Avoiding the lie of self-focus and realizing the fulfillment that comes when you care for the things that you've been given. Finding happiness and simplicity. I hope that this is the start of a recovery back to slower living, that more people realize that less is more is actually true.
40% of Gen Z say they feel stressed or anxious all or most of the time. That's according to researchers at Deloitte. Faced with skyrocketing cost of living and looming climate catastrophes, young people today say they want a slower, more intentional life, and many are turning to nature. From homesteading to off-grid communities, they are redefining success through self-sufficiency. And today, we're hearing from those actually embracing this shift and discussing whether rural living is a key to a healthier, more sustainable society. Joining us are Shannon Hayes, author and the CEO of Sapbush Hollow Farm, Victor Gabriel Lara, creative director and regenerative farming advocate, Patrick Vernuccio, urban gardening content creator and author, and Mohammed Ali Al Khater, an entrepreneur and the co-founder of the Torba farm here in Doha. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for joining the stream today. I would like to start by sharing your personal journeys with our audience. Victor, you were part of a community farm in Hawaii until very recently. Can you tell us how long you spent there and what made you decide to actually turn away and abandon urban life?
Yes, absolutely. So I was in a farm in Hawaii for nearly 2 years. And before that, I had recently graduated college, so I was in the art world, working for many galleries, and then also as an artist. Mm-hmm. And so quickly after seeing the environment, the general climate in that space, I started to realize it was somewhat, as in many different fields and industries, somewhat of a setup, a very rigged, strict, fixed system that was working more for one group of people as opposed to others, and others being beginners entering the art world, mm-hmm. specifically artists. I think it's a tough position. Mm-hmm. So that made me look elsewhere.
For other opportunities, for a big change. Patrick, you haven't gone as far as leaving the city yet, but you have brought some aspects of farm living to your balcony. We'll talk more about your future plans later, but how did this journey start for you? I believe it was back in Amsterdam.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually knowing nothing about gardening. And at that time, I was working in marketing as a marketing executive in big entertainment companies. And just one day, randomly, I went to a gardening center and I was like, okay, let's buy seeds, let's buy some pots. I have a small balcony in Amsterdam. And everything started from there. And then I waited basically 36 years to plant my first seed. And when I had these seeds and this soil in my hands, I didn't have a clue. I didn't know anything on what to do with them. Mm-hmm. And slowly I started to plant lettuce, radish. It works. And basically after that, I really wanted to show people that actually you can grow your food even while living in the city, mm-hmm. on a windowsill, on a balcony, or on a terrace. And now there are like also a lot of community gardens. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like my gardening journey started really totally randomly. And it's been now 6 years that I'm gardening, and it has really changed my life.
And you've been sharing that journey with people on social media, and that has grown quite a lot. We're going to, again, talk a little bit more about that later. But Shannon, let me get your experience here, which is a little bit different from Victor's and Patrick's in the sense that you are a third-generation farmer, and that at a specific time you actually planned to shift the other way to urban life, but then you gave up. Can you share that story briefly with us?
Sure. Well, so I was raised in the Catskill Mountains, the upper part of the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. And my neighbors all growing up were farmers. My parents were educated, but we had a family farm. And I was going to school during the farm crisis. And I like to say that they were pushing farm kids off the land as though we were weeds in the spray line of herbicides. The farming life looked terrible. But so I went ahead and got my education. I went as far as getting a PhD. The more I studied, however, the more I really started to recognize the social and economic value and the ecological value of small farming. And when I got out, I was fully qualified to go and pursue a degree, to pursue a job as a professor someplace. And I recognized that if my husband and I moved away from Sapbush Hollow Farm, we were actually going to have a higher cost of living that would not offset what we could do for ourselves if we just stayed home, stayed with the family, and continued our family's legacy. I also started to realize that it was so difficult to keep a family farm going, that family farms were so endangered, that probably the best thing I could do with my education is maybe figure out how to make it work on the family farm.
And you certainly have. Your daughter is there with you, a fourth-generation farmer. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Mohammed, you inherited land from your family here, and it turned into a very successful business. Tell us more about Torba Farm. Why did you decide to actually work with this? And what are the difficulties, the challenges in actually creating a farm, setting up a farm in the middle of the desert?
I think the most challenging thing about setting up a farm in Qatar is asking yourself, what is it that I can do in a land that is symbolically a barren place to many around the world, that would inspire people to learn, learn the principles, learn the concepts, learn the ideas that bring forth life in anywhere around the world. So I think growing up in an environment where we've always felt like there was no greenery, we always felt like greenery was something foreign. So I asked myself, what is it that sustains life universally around the world, and how can these principles come together in a way that brings about greenery and life, not merely in the setting or notion of a typical farm, but in a way where life and regenerative farming can spring in the middle of the desert like an oasis and sustain itself, so that we can be inspired to live in a more sustainable way, and in a way that allows us to build our economies and our societies without draining our resources, without taking away from the land.
And as I said, it's become a very successful business. As you guys are talking today, I imagine that our viewers are drawing quite a lot of inspiration. And on social media, we see a large number of people sharing the reasons they want to or have made this particular shift from urban life to rural living. Here's one of them.
Do you want to know why there's the younger generation starting to make this big push to start homesteading and being more self-sufficient? And it's not just because it comes with cute baby farm animals. It's that everything in this economy has gotten so expensive that we thought to ourselves, hey, why not let's start baking our own bread, maybe to save a little money, growing some of our own food so that we can save a dollar here or there. And then the part that really started to hook the generation, that gets us full blown into homesteading, is that society has basically just gone crazy. And we're realizing that these old traditional ways have just gave us a sense of peace, and we just don't feel so caught up in the big rat race that the world is. If the way society was at least just halfway decent, then you wouldn't be seeing this rush of these younger millennials starting to do things that like their grandma and grandpas used to do. But the farm fresh eggs and the cute baby farm animals definitely is a bonus to doing this.
Victor, is that feeling something you came across among other members of the community you were with? Not the eggs and the cute little animals. I mean, the sense that the system is a bit broken.
Yes, totally. I think it's one of the things that, as you asked prior, maybe I was experiencing while I was in the city, but because you don't know an alternative, maybe you're not so aware that those things exist within you. And once you get out there, that's definitely one big narrative that's happening. Sort of, well, I gave this a try. I'm not happy with the way that the system is, whether it's at a local level, at a country level. And so people look elsewhere. And I think it's very important to consider the intentions that come behind this kind of, if you're a transplant, if you're looking to move, to start a new farm, for example, to check on that intention, make sure that it's not coming from a place of resentment only. But, as Mohammed mentioned, understanding that what you're really going into is the very core, the essence of life, which is, in a way, not to leave it just at that, but it's food. And more than that, it's understanding the cycle of how those things, you sit at your table, understanding how that stuff gets there, all the work that goes behind that.
And it's a lot of work, right,
so,
Victor? I was going to say that many people are dreaming about this life, but perhaps they have a very romanticized version of it. Patrick, your passion, as I said at the start, for permaculture has become work and no longer fits in your balcony. So you are expanding, transforming your life even further. You're looking for a plot of land in Sicily, I believe. It sounds like a dream, but is it really? I mean, what are the challenges involved when setting up a project, a life-changing project like that?
Yeah, sure. Indeed, it's a challenge. I think like a lot of people dream about being self-sufficient. The path towards self-sufficiency is definitely a journey. I experienced it myself, because I was born and raised in Paris. After I had my first balcony in Amsterdam, a second balcony and a beautiful food garden in Berlin. And now I have a patio and also a backyard garden. And just extending from a balcony to a backyard garden, it's already way more work for sure, because it's different techniques. So I think my advice would be definitely for people who wants to live a more regenerative life is to be just slow paced also, be patient, learn step by step. And I think the main threat would be to say, okay, from year one, I want to have a big regenerative farm. Everything is self-sufficient. Everything will be working by itself. No, it takes so much time to go there. But I think it's a beautiful goal. It's a beautiful goal. And this is, I think, what people want now in their life, because there is the money aspect for sure. Life in the city is way more expensive. But I think also we're just losing our roots. We're just losing a purpose while living in a city, because everything goes so fast. And I think people want just to live a more slow-paced life with slow food. And people are just annoyed of eating food that has no nutrients anymore, and also that has just no taste. So that's why I wanted to grow some lettuce and some tomatoes on my balcony. And I really rediscovered the taste of organic vegetables. So yeah, for sure, there is something on the way. And as I always say, the revolution starts in your garden. And I think it's a beautiful revolution that is underway right now.
Shannon, you wrote about this, not one book, but two, in fact. And Radical Homemakers is particularly interesting because it's also a testament that this is not new. I mean, back in 2010, you were traveling across the United States, talking to people about this journey. Can you talk to us about that and how you saw this trend, this movement evolve over the past 15 years? People retaking control, as Patrick was saying, of what they're eating, of what they're consuming, and of the way they're living.
Yes. In 2010, I traveled across the country by train with one daughter in a backpack, one daughter at my side, and my husband with me. And we visited people in all different walks of life, people who were doing this sort of lifestyle on apartment balconies, people who were borrowing land, people who were generational farmers like myself. And I investigated, how do you have a balance of power? How do you make sure that everyone in the home is going to be happy and taken care of? And I also looked at, how are they going to make their finances work? So, and also, how do you continue to have a fulfilling life? Because I think you touched on it, Anelise. You can burn out. I mean, just as much as you can burn out on a corporate job, you can burn out on this kind of life too. And Patrick touched on it too. If you go too fast, if you go too hard, if you have too much of a demand for perfectionism, all of these things can work against us. So I had to learn, what are the keys to survival? How do you do this and continue to enjoy your life?
And social media has a good but a bad side to this, of course, because of that target of being perfect, right? And there's so much content out there. Mohammed, I want to bring you back in. What have been the main takeaways during this entire process for you? What did you learn? And what would your advice be for people that are really interested in setting up something like this? Perhaps more like you did, more of a business, really, than a lifestyle, more of a something that they can work with.
I think the word Torba, which means rich soil that gives life, has a lot to teach us. There's a lot that we can learn from soil. Soil, in essence, embodies the entirety of life and the complexity of life. There is more complexity in a handful of soil than there is in a generation of the stars that we can see with our barren eyes. And that's something we really underestimate. We underestimate the life-giving force of soil. And I think overlooking that has been one of the downfalls of modern society, because if we nurture the soil and if we take the wisdom of the soil, the things that the soil teaches us, in many forms, in many ways. For example, the life forms that are contained in the soil itself are the very source of life that gives nutrients and water to the plants. The fungi that live in the soil allow the soil to retain water. The complex web of minerals and rocks and sand and other life forms that exist in the soil allow it to sustain life. What is the difference between a desert and a forest? And that's a question I ask anyone who wants to set up a farm. The difference is the soil, and it's not the type of humus or the type of compost. No, it's in the complexity of life in that soil. If you have living soil, you essentially have a forest. If you have dead soil, you have a desert. And I think that's the first instruction. That's the first thing I tell people you need to understand before you even embark on setting up a farm. And the other thing is, as a business model, whether it's a farm or whether it's agritourism center that you want to set up, one of the first things you need to ask yourself is, as a sector, the agri sector, if your input far outweighs your output, then then it means that you are running that business in pretty much the same model that capitalist economies thrive. And if you're setting out to be closer to nature and live in a sustainable way, you want to be mindful of the input. You want to be mindful of the energy consumption, of the fuel, of the compost, of the impact you have as a farm on the environment. You know, there are a lot of successful farms that measure their success by how many kilos of tomato they produce. But do they count the cost on the environment? How much pesticides do they use? How much fungicides do they use? And what impact that has not only on the environment, but the human being that consumes the output? So I think there are many questions that we need to ask ourselves seriously before embarking on setting out to develop a farm as an entity that nourishes us as a society, or as a business that is, you know, part of the tourism sector.
And again, it all goes back to the way we're consuming as well, as you rightly said. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I also want to give Victor and Patrick and Shannon a chance to give tips to our audience today. Victor, when we chatted about this before the show, you mentioned education, the importance of education. Would that be your #1 tip today, if anyone is willing or thinking about making this shift?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's necessary for anybody considering or even toying with the idea of going to live on a farm, trying to start their own farm. I mean, it's essential that you get just the fundamentals, as other guests have mentioned, Shannon and Mohammed, about, you know, the very basics. What is a seed? How do you start that? And I think the essence of that is local community, getting with your local farmer, go visit the farm, see what it's like out there, spend a day working there. And a lot of this, again, we go back to that doing. You can't read all that much about this. I'm sure there's many volumes that have been written on this stuff, but ultimately you have to get doing. And for that, you need somebody, a mentor, whether it's a local farmer. And, you know, there's also other programs at the local or, you know, government level in each country, I'm sure, that offer some sort of basic education on this matter.
And a lot of education
and community
is needed indeed. Patrick, very shortly, what would be your #1 tip today for our viewers?
Just buy some seeds, just buy some soil, and you will see how magic it is. And I think when you start gardening and growing your own food, you rediscover your purpose in this life, because we are just a tiny part of the equation. Like, everything is interconnected. And like Mohammed was saying, I think when you have soil and when you want to have healthy soil, you're also giving back versus just always consuming and taking. And I think like the whole process of farming and gardening is always this, like, we are these little parts. We have to compose with nature, not against, and we have like to focus on quality and not only like the quantity. I think this is like really crucial, and there is a shift happening right now, and I'm super happy to see that, you know, on social media, and that's really what I'm trying to share on my page, The Frenchy Gardener. It's really small steps make big impact, and yeah,
and
I would
Shannon,
love to see everyone with seeds and soil.
Final word from you, Shannon, on potential tips for those watching us today.
Okay. Well, I wrote a whole book to help people make the transition, and that's called Redefining Rich. But my advice would be, and you can find it in the book, get your financial and emotional house in order. Start with your quality of life. Who are you doing this with? What do you want your life to be like? Because there are so many ways that you could go that maybe don't feed what you most want and how you want your days to look. And then get your financial house in order. I talk about it in Redefining Rich, but you really need to organize your finances so that you understand not just where the money is going to come from, but the actual value of what you're doing, so that you can reduce the amount of money that you're going to need. So get the financial house in order, get your emotional house, your spiritual house in order to know what you're going for, what defines a quality of life for you.
Getting your financial and emotional health in order is actually a great advice, no matter what you are doing today. Shannon, Victor, Patrick, and Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us here on the stream.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. Do keep the conversation going online and let us know if you are thinking of setting up a farm or grow your own veggies in your balcony. For that, you can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream. Take care, and I'll see you soon.